As the sun rose that morning on the day of Job's trial, he rose up to serve God as any other day, bound and determined to live in God's favor. Nothing could stand in his way. But then the messengers, they came one by one with their stories. In just a few moments, Job lost all he had, his great wealth and riches, the health of his body. Even Job's children were dead. He said, "The Lord giveth, he taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. I've served him before and I'll serve him today. Blessed be the name of the Lord." Then his wife came before him to voice her opinion. She said, "You should end it, just curse God and die." But Job rose from the ashes and he looked toward the heavens and brushed back the tears from his eyes. He said, "The Lord giveth, he taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. I've served him before and I'll serve him today. Blessed be the name of the Lord. When trouble comes suddenly, blessed be the name. When storm winds blow violently, blessed be the name. When Satan comes oppressing me, blessed be the name. I'll still serve God faithfully. Blessed be the name. The Lord giveth, he taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. I've served him before and I'll serve him today. Blessed be the name. Blessed be the name. Blessed be the name of the Lord.
All right. Good morning. Welcome, Road Baptist Church, and those that are watching. Thanks for tuning in and being here with us in the live broadcast. Let me know how the sound is, and I'm here right now. I'm here by myself, so kind of like we used to do. And so, if the sound's not coming in clearly, let me know, and we'll try and make any adjustments that we need to. Thank you for being understanding about this morning. As of right now, I do feel okay, and but started feeling just didn't sleep, haven't been sleeping well, and very congested. So I didn't want to take any chances. I will let you know. I know we will not have a Bible classes tonight or a Bible study or anything tonight for the men or women or for the children, and so we won't have anything tonight. I will let you know about Tuesday morning concerning our Tuesday morning 11 o'clock service that we've been doing. We've started going over the tabernacle in just last week, and don't want to cancel that, not have the service, but I'm going to let you know how I feel. If I feel better than what I do now, then we'll have it. If I don't feel better, then we won't worry about it. But I'll let you know about Tuesday and also about Wednesday's services. And so praying for you. There were a couple of families in the church that had tested positive, so pray for them. And as they make adjustments, I know you can hear it. I am very congested, so didn't think that it would be wise to have church being congested. I wouldn't want to get kicked out of church, and so. But we'll be in Psalm number 13 this morning, and I appreciate you, those that are tuning in, those that are watching. When the video is finished, share it and let someone know about it. And I hope it'll be a help to you If you're not able to watch the whole video this morning, or you tune in a little bit later, go back and watch this. This is a psalm. This is not what I had originally intended to preach on this morning. I wanted to preach from a different psalm. Now, I know we've been going through the Psalms lately. As I've studied the Psalms, I'm learning so much more about the Psalms than what I've seen before. And as the Lord is leading me in the Psalms and looking at the Psalms from a different perspective, that has really changed my outlook on them. And so that's what we've been doing. We're going to look at Psalm 139. We'll look at that maybe next week or the week after as the Lord leads. But Psalm number 13 is a great psalm. I've preached from this psalm before. Matter of fact, I've had people to make reference to this psalm to me before, just in passing. They've mentioned it, and so Psalm number 13 is a great psalm of encouragement. It's a psalm of when God takes His time. It's a psalm of when we're praying and it seems as though God is just not moving. It seems as though God is not answering prayer, or if He is answering prayer, He is not getting in a hurry. And so Psalm 13, we want to look at that. Maybe we can glean some help here from David. I'm not going to have a PowerPoint this morning, and so it's not much of an outline. It's 3 little points. I'll give you those points as we preach through if you want to jot them down. But I would encourage you, have a pen in your hand, maybe a piece of paper also. Jot a few thoughts down. Circle some of these verses, because I guarantee you these verses will be a help to you, if not today, in the weeks to come, in the weeks ahead. Psalm 13, the Bible says, "How long wilt thou forget me, O Lord? Forever? How long wilt thou hide thy face from me? How long shall I take counsel in my soul, having sorrow in my heart daily? How long shall mine enemy be exalted over me? Consider and hear me, O Lord my God. Lighten mine eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death. Lest mine enemies say, I have prevailed against him, and those that trouble me rejoice when I am moved. But I have trusted in thy mercy. My heart shall rejoice in thy salvation. I will sing unto the Lord, because he hath dealt bountifully with me." Now here in this psalm, I need to turn something down. I'm getting a little bit of feedback. Here in this psalm, we're not exactly sure the setting of the psalm. We're not sure when David wrote this psalm. Now, in all likelihood, it's one of two main possibilities. One is when King Saul was chasing after David. When David, before he was king, when David was supporting Saul, killed Goliath, became the general of Saul's army. For years, he led and served Saul. Saul became angry. Saul became jealous because of the sinfulness within Saul's heart, and pursued after David. There's a great lesson there about jealousy, a great lesson there about envy and how it can overtake us when we're not careful. And David, it's very possible that that's why David is writing this, because Saul is chasing David. Or it may have been when Absalom rebelled against David and began to pursue David and took the kingdom over from his father. Now, my personal opinion is I think that this is when King Saul is pursuing David. That's just my opinion. That's just what I think, okay? I don't have necessarily any reasons as to why. I won't list any reasons as far as why I believe that. That's just, as I think about it, that's just the way I take this when I'm reading this, that Saul is pursuing David, and David is begging God to help him, to deliver him, to stay off this enemy. He is surrounding him, and that's how I perceive this psalm to be. But in this psalm, though, what we see is a very important principle. Now, I realize that when we read our Bibles and when we read about men of the past and we read about women of the past and we read of their great faith, we read of what God did for them, we see in the Old Testament, God opens the Red Sea and they walk across on dry ground, and we'll scratch our heads at times and say, God, why don't you do that now? Just open up the Red Sea now. Or Joshua, the sun stood still in the sky. God held the earth in its orbit and in its rotation and didn't stop the earth from moving What an amazing feat that God did. And we wonder, God, why don't you do that now? Well, I want you to consider something here with David. That was just several hundred years before David is in this position, and yet God didn't do that for David. Sometimes I think that we read these stories in the Old Testament, and when we read them, or we read about these men and women from the past, when we read these stories, we think, well, where is that God? I mean, listen, I've said the same thing. I read the stories about Elisha and Elijah and how Elijah performed all of these wonderful miracles. And then Elisha comes up behind him, and he takes the garment of Elijah in his hand and smites the water and says, where is the Lord God of Elijah? And then God opens up the waters of the Jordan and allows Elisha to walk across. I don't know how many times I have prayed that personally within myself. Where is the God of Elijah? Where is the God of the Old Testament? Where is the great God that performed all of these miracles and that moved this and that changed this? And where is the God of the New Testament that says if we have faith of the grain of a mustard seed, we can pray and we can move mountains? Where is that God? Where is that? Where is that being? I mean, these are thoughts that I have. And I'm saying that I want you to understand that David right here is saying the exact same thing. David is praying the exact same thing. He wants to know how long certain things are going to have to happen. God, why have you not intervened? And I'm saying that because I want you to understand that, David wrote this 2,500 years ago, and, 500, 600 years, 700 years before Christ or whatever. And here we are 2,000 years after Christ. So we're looking 25 to maybe 2,700 years ago. David wrote this, and guess what? The man after God's own heart had the same feelings. He had the same thoughts. He had the same emotional problems that we have today. I mean, nothing has changed. Nothing is any different. But what I want you to see, though, from this is that God hasn't changed. Now, this is not a slight on the character of God, and I hope that we see that even as we study this psalm here briefly just this morning, but I want you to understand that God hasn't changed. 2,700 years ago, David is praying, God, how long? 2,700 years later, we are, as God's people, are still praying the same thing. And so, don't think within yourself that no one else has this problem. Don't think within yourself no one else has this issue. Don't think within yourself, oh, God, I'm the only one that God is not answering prayer right now, or I'm the only one that it seems like God is just taking his sweet time. Don't think that. That is a ploy of the devil. I promise you, that is nothing more than from the pit of hell itself. I mean, Satan, if he can cause you to doubt what God has done for you in the past and what God is doing right now, child of God, he has you. He has got you right by the nape of the neck, and he has you. And I want to encourage you this morning to be careful, to be weary of that, to be watchful. When those thoughts begin to flood your mind, okay, Brother Dan, what do you do? And we're going to get into the psalm in just a minute, I promise. What is it that I do? And I'm going to tell you, what is it that I pray? Well, I pray what David prayed. God, how long? How long is this going to happen? But one thing that I have learned to pray for me, myself, this is me personally, okay? And that is this. I have to ask God, God, give me clarity. Give me clarity. God, help me to see this. Because right now my perception is really off. Right now my perception is really bad. I am not looking at things right. I am not looking at things clearly. God, give me clarity. James says it like this: if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God. So I'm asking for wisdom. I'm asking for clarity. And when we do that, God in his timing, He may not answer the prayer over here that I'm praying for here, but he gives me clarity right here to help me to understand things. So let's look at the psalm. There's me personally, there's 6 verses. Okay, there's no breaks in the psalm. Okay, it's one continuous song that David is writing. But for our outline, I have divided it up into 3 sections. Okay, verses 1 and 2, verses 3 and 4, and verses 5 and 6. In verses 1 and 2, just brief outline, notice David's feelings, okay? His feelings. Now, verse 1, he says this, how long wilt thou forget me, O Lord? Notice, and before I get into that, notice that this psalm, if you look under Psalm 13, the title, to the chief musician, a psalm of David. I mentioned this the other week, to the chief musician. This is the head choir director of the tabernacle worship and eventually becomes the temple worship. This is the song that David is writing, and he hands it directly to the choir director, and he says, I want this song sung the next time that we have a meeting or we get together. That's kind of the idea of this. This psalm became a very famous or very special psalm in the heart of David. I mean, it became very special to him. So notice how David feels in verse 1. How long wilt thou forget me, O Lord? Again, notice the personal feeling here. David is not looking at everything and everybody else and looking at all the other problems that are happening around him. David is looking within himself. Now, I'm not saying that that's wrong, and I'm not saying that it's good, and I'm not saying that it's bad. I'm just simply telling you this is what David did. David it is very inward focused. Again, I'm not saying that that's evil and that it is sinful, because David needed help. And so if you need help, what do you have to do? You have to pray and ask God to help you. This is what David is doing, but David is expressing the fact that he feels that God has forgotten him. How long wilt thou forget me, O Lord? He calls him Jehovah. He calls him Lord, his personal name. This is a personal expression of David's feelings. He feels as though that God has forgotten him, as though God has just dropped him off somewhere and left, and that's just the end of it. Now, I don't know about anyone else, okay? But there are times, I believe that the majority of our lives, all of us watching, that we feel as though that God has forgotten us. Now, whatever those reasons are, sometimes it's because things don't work out the way that we think they should work out. Sometimes it's because maybe our prayers are not answered right. I don't know. Or something unexpected happens that's bad, and we feel, well, if God hadn't forgotten about me, or this has happened, and because this has happened, God obviously is not watching over me. He's not protecting me. Whatever the circumstance is that causes this, okay? Whatever the circumstance is, it's just that it is the circumstance that brings this out. And David says, Lord, how long are you going to forget me? But then notice the very next two words, forever. And David had come to a place in his life where not only did he feel as though God had forgotten him, but he felt that this forgetfulness was going to be forever. Now, as we study the psalm, as we continue to read, we know that David understands within himself that God is not going to forget me forever. But this is what David is feeling. He is expressing what is taking place on the inside of his life. How long wilt thou forget me, O Lord, forever? Then look at this, the next part of verse 1. How long wilt thou hide thy face from me? Now, not only does he feel that God has forgotten him, now he feels as though God is forsaking him, that God is hiding from him, playing hide and seek with God. He's trying to find him, and God is covering up his face from David. That God is hiding himself. The idea of this hiding his face is that God is concealing his presence. God has become very quiet. God is not making himself known to David. David is not feeling God. David is not seeing God at work. He's not seeing the fingerprints of God in his life. Sometimes we can look back over our life and maybe a week or a month, and we can see God doing things, and we at the time we don't, but we look back and we can see his fingerprints. Well, David is at a place in his life where he can't even see that. He feels as though God has forgotten him and has forsaken him and hiding himself from him. Verse number 2 is a very interesting verse. This is all about how David feels. How long shall I take counsel in my soul, he says, having sorrow in my heart daily. How long shall I take counsel in my soul, having sorrow in my heart daily? Now, this is a very dangerous, kind of a dangerous place where we find David. Because David is, and I don't say this to sound critical. I don't mean to say this because we all find ourselves here, but David right now is being controlled by how he feels. Okay, he feels that God has forgotten him, and he feels that God has forsaken him, that he can't be found. This is how he feels. Now, the reason he feels this way, okay, is because God hasn't answered his prayer. The reason he feels this way is because he can't see God at work in his life. Now, it may be due to a lack of faith, or it may be due to the fact that God is not revealing himself. Maybe God has hid his hands in his work from David's life. Sometimes God does that, but because of that, verse 2 is then what happens is David now is beginning to seek counsel within himself. In other words, he is trying to figure things out on his own. He's trying to find out why 1 plus 1 right now is not equaling 3, or not equals 1 plus 1 doesn't equal 2. 1 plus 1 is equaling 3 for some reason, and I'm trying to figure that out, and I don't know why. He is trying to put the pieces of his life together. He is taking counsel within himself, having sorrow in his heart daily. David is really expressing to God how desperately he needs God. He is saying, God, I can't find you. You're not giving me answers, so now I'm having to look within myself for these answers, and I'm doing this having sorrow in my heart daily. And you know this as well as I know this, that when we are emotionally high or emotionally low, that is not the time that we need to seek counsel within ourselves. When things are going great and we're on top of the world and we're on cloud 9 and we're just feeling good about life and feeling good about everything and everything is hunky-dory, don't make a big decision at that moment in time. Why? Because you may make a bad decision because everything is going well. But the same thing is said when everything is going bad and we're low and we're humdrum and things are not going good. Don't make a rash and a hasty decision then and do something then. Why? Because it is a highly emotional and volatile time. Here, this is where David is. Because he is so low and he is having this sorrow in his heart, he knows I shouldn't be looking within myself, God, but I can't find you. I don't know. Maybe those that are watching, you've never found yourself doing that. You may not express it like this, but this may be how you express this. Okay? Something bad happens, and you may find yourself questioning the existence of God. Well, is God even real? Is Jesus Christ even real? Is that Bible even truth? Okay, now we may not just come out and say that we say that, but those thoughts may pass through our minds. Do you know what that is? That is what David is doing. He is taking counsel within himself. But then listen to what he says in the next part. How long shall mine enemy be exalted over me? All right, now David is beginning to reveal even more about this. The issue is that enemy, and he is seeking God for the help, but God is not delivering him. David is revealing more in this prayer what's taking place in his heart. David is trying to seek counsel, how to figure this problem out with his enemy. He's been seeking after God about the enemy, but God is not answering the prayer concerning the enemy, and the enemy is just running all over him. David is having to run. He's having to hide. He's having to fix all of these things. And why doesn't God just open up the heavens, pour it down to him, come down out of the heavens and destroy my enemies? Why doesn't he rain fire down from Sodom and Gomorrah? Oh, Okay, David says, Lord, where are you? But this is how David feels. All right, this is how David feels. He's controlled by his fear. He's controlled by his emotions. And these feelings, of course, they came from the circumstances of his life. And I'm not throwing rocks at David here. This is how David feels. I mean, I feel this way at times. But notice, secondly, what David is facing in verses 3 and 4 very quickly. Now, what is he facing? In verse 3 and 4, he is facing death and defeat. And he's facing pain and persecution. Now, verse 3 says, consider and hear me, O Lord my God. So he pauses after verses 1 and 2. And he really says, okay, please consider me. Please, God, just turn and look to me. Hear me. O Lord my God. O Jehovah my God. David is declaring there is no other God for himself. He is declaring there is no other God. but he is declaring that he worships no other God. We know there was a lot of gods in these days and statues and false idols and things, but folks, we have gods today. We may not bow ourselves down to those gods. We may not worship little statues and little stones and things of this nature. But this is the thing. David is turning to the one that can solve the issue. My God in my life is who do I turn to solve my issue? That David is saying, okay, God, I've sought you. You've not answered me. You're not responding. I'm trying to figure these things out. My enemies are running all over me. They're doing all of these things. But then he stops and says, but God, I need you to consider me. I am turning to you to solve my problem. I am turning to you to fix the issue that is taking place in my life. Consider and hear me, O Lord my God. Lighten mine eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death. God, David says, I'm at a point to die. He is so overwhelmed. He is so burdened with this issue and with this problem. He is so burdened with the fact that God does not seem to be answering him that he says, God, if you do not lighten mine eyes, if you don't open up my eyes, I will sleep the sleep of death. I will physically and emotionally and mentally, I'm going to die. God, you've got to help me. Consider and hear me, O Lord my God. Understand, he turns to God. We all have gods. And I'm not talking about using like common sense that God gives to solve a situation, but I'm talking about in these deep emotional situations like where David, he says, Lord my God, consider and hear me. Why? Okay, verse 4. Lest mine enemies say, I have prevailed against him. Answer my prayers. I need you to consider. I need you to hear me. Why? Lest mine enemies say, I have prevailed against him. And those that trouble me rejoice when I am moved. And folks, this is going to sound a little odd, you know. But what David is saying is God, I've declared that you are my God. I have declared that I am following you. I have declared that you are my help. I have declared that you will answer my prayer. The enemies know that I am a God worshiper. They know that I am a God server. They know that I live for you, Jehovah. And God, if you do not answer my prayer, if you do not deliver me, the enemy will say that we have prevailed against him. That those that trouble me, they will rejoice when I am moved, when I stop believing, when I stop living for you, when I am moved out of my place and my faith is gone, and I throw up my hands and I give up and I quit, and the enemy will say, we've got him. Where is his God now? Where is the one that he prayed to? Where is the one that he cried out to for deliverance? And this is where David is. Okay, this is where David is. David says, God, I need help. And those that are watching on Facebook or on YouTube, I'm going to continue to preach this, but it has frozen up somewhat. So bear with us on this. I'm not sure. In verse number 5 and 6, as we get to the end, notice David's faith here in verse 5 and 6. But I have trusted in thy mercy. My heart shall rejoice in thy salvation. I will sing unto the Lord because he hath dealt bountifully with me. Now, this is the end here. David is telling us some great things about this. And hold on one moment, those that are watching. The internet is locking up on us for some reason. Please bear with me. I'm watching it. I can see it. I'm not sure why we reset the internet. Things were going smooth, and then all of a sudden it stopped. But this is when God takes his time. Look at verse 5 and 6. But I have trusted in thy mercy. My heart shall rejoice in thy salvation. I will sing unto the Lord because he hath dealt bountifully with me. This is here we've mentioned this before concerning where David is with faith and with where David is with fear. How often we find ourselves living in this place of faith and living in this place of fear. We often In verse 5, we notice David's actions. He says, "But I have trusted in thy mercy. My heart shall rejoice in thy salvation." The idea of this here again, David's faith. We mentioned this the other week when David prayed and he cried out and he said, "Prayed, I will trust in you. I will trust in thee." And we mentioned that oftentimes in our lives as Bible believers and as Christians, we find ourselves in that paradox. We find ourselves in that place of faith, and we find ourselves in that place of fear. Here, this is where David is again. He is in the place of faith, but he's also in that place of fear. And often we as believers we find ourselves there. We find ourselves, as Charles Spurgeon said it, in that paradox of light and darkness. We believe that God can deliver us, but yet we still have fear in our hearts. And we have fear in our hearts, and yet we run to God by faith. And so we find often in this place, we find ourselves here. We find ourselves fighting with faith and fighting between fear. And here we see David, verse 1 and 2, and we saw what he was facing in verse 3 and 4. But now in verse 5 and 6, quickly, we can see what he is trusting in and see his actions. "But I have trusted in thy mercy. My heart shall rejoice in thy salvation." Notice what David does. The circumstances have not changed. The situation did not lessen. God has not, please understand, God has not revealed himself in a mighty way to David here. Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. But what has happened is that David has paused and David has stopped. And David says, "But I have trusted in thy mercy." This is in the past. David says, right now in the present, I don't see you. Right now in the present, I'm not hearing you. Right now in the present, I don't know what is going on. I can't see you. I can't hear you. I can't find you. But I have trusted in the past. I have trusted in thy mercy. My heart shall rejoice in thy salvation. David is trusting in the past mercy of God. In other words, he looks back in his life when God showed him mercy, and he looked back in his life when God was doing wonderful things for him, and that is what David is resting on. That is what David is trusting in. My heart shall rejoice in thy salvation. He knows that God will deliver. He doesn't know in what way that God is going to deliver. He does not know how God is going to deliver, but he does know that God will deliver. He understands that God is going to bring salvation, that God is going to deliver his soul in and from the situation that he is in. Now, that does not mean, please hear, I don't want to give any sense of false assurance or hope on this. Please understand, when we read the New Testament and we look over church history, okay, there are times when God's salvation is not in what we think it's going to be. It's not in the way that we think that God is going to deliver and bring about that salvation. It's not always just going to be okay. I know that doesn't really give a lot of help and cover. It's just going to be okay. Well, we don't know that it's just going to be okay. We don't know that the person that lost their job, that they're going to find a better job making more money. We don't know that's going to happen. We don't know that. We don't know that the person who is sick is going to pull through. We don't know that. Okay, that may not be what God does. That may not be the answer. That may not be the salvation that God brings, but God will bring his deliverance. And his deliverance is always in himself. God's presence and God's grace and God's peace and God's clarity in the situation. That is how God delivers. And this is how God is going to help us. We see his faith and we see it in his action. We also see it in his attitude. David, he was depressed at the beginning, and now he is delighted in the things of God. He is resting in God. What is bringing about this? Some great movement by God? No. But simply that David remembers the works and the words of God from his past. He remembers the promises that God has given to him. And when he rests in those promises, his faith, it's not that his faith is bringing him out, no, but God responds to our faith. When I take a step of faith, God responds to that faith and then gives grace and peace, just like at salvation. Salvation is here offered. When you got saved, here is salvation. Your faith, you heard the word of God, you believed it, and you said, you know what, I want to receive Jesus. So you placed your faith in him, and when you did that, then God responded and gave faith. Here, this is what is happening in David's life. David understands and David realizes what God, not what God is doing, but he knows that God has helped before and that God will help him again. And he's resting in that. And so his attitude has changed. The circumstances has not changed, but his attitude has definitely changed. In verse 6, he says, I will sing unto the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me. I will sing unto the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me. Notice verse 5 and 6 is past tense. I have trusted in thy mercy. My heart shall, that's future tense, rejoice in thy salvation. So notice that. Because of what God did for me yesterday, I'm going to rejoice in God's salvation tomorrow. You see that? Because of what he did yesterday, trusted. Verse 6, I will sing unto the Lord. I will sing to the Lord today. Why? Because yesterday he has dealt bountifully with me. Notice that when God takes his time, we've talked about that before, when God takes the long way around. We preached from Exodus on that 3, 4, 5 weeks ago. From Exodus, when God takes the long way. Okay, Exodus 13, we preached on that. And sometimes God does that. That gives us some answers in that passage why God takes the long way around. Here, there's not necessarily an answer as, well, what do I do why is God not answering? Or why is it taking so long? Why? When, O Lord? How long, O Lord? What I want you to see is David's response. And what is his response? It's one of faith. What is David's response? David says, I'm going to pause and I'm going to stop. And I'm going to think about what God did for me yesterday. I'm going to think about what God did for me in times past. I'm sure David probably thought about the time that he fought Goliath and how God brought deliverance and help to him. He probably even thought when he killed the lion and the bear and remembered how God delivered him. We know that he relied on that when he went and fought Goliath. He probably thought of the times when he was going out to battle for King Saul and how God always delivered him. Or when Saul threw the javelin, and yes, David jumped out of the way, but God spared David. God, he was there protecting David. And so David in his mind saying, God, why have you not opened up the heavens? Why are you not just picking these people up and moving these things out of the way? God doesn't answer him on that. God doesn't even tell him, give him a reason. But he does step back. And he says, you know what, God, you have answered my prayer before. And I'm going to keep praying about this situation. I'm going to keep trusting you because you have delivered me before and you've brought deliverance to my life. You've helped me in the past. And then what does God do? God responds. And we see it in David's attitude. God is giving him grace. God is giving him peace. God is giving him his presence in his life. And David says, I rejoice and I rest in that. Child of God, church, sometimes we wonder, when and why God is taking so long and where are you, God? We can't hear him. We can't find him. It's like he's forgotten us and he's forsaken us. But run to him, God, your God. Turn to him to solve your problems. Turn to him. Trust him. Rest in him. Don't look at everything that's happening. And I say this real carefully. But a lot of things, with the election and stuff like that. And I know there's been people that have watched some of these, I'm going to say it, false preachers on TV or on the internet. Don't you worry, and I'm just using this as an example. Okay, that's all I'm using this for, as an example. Okay, Joe Biden is our president now. Okay, we need to pray for him. He is our president. Whether you like him, dislike him, or whatever it is, pray for him as our president. We need to do that. But those back in, November and December and things, it was January. It's these false preachers getting on the internet or and on TV, and these people, don't you worry, Donald Trump's going to be your president or whatever, Well, this is going to happen and that's going to happen. I saw several things. And some of them, you pause, you scratch yourself, oh, man, wow. But this is my point. We can't look at those things. We have to trust this book. God is the one who has the answers. And I guarantee you, God's not letting anybody know what's going on. We know what's happening. We're going to the end times. That's where we're headed. Antichrist, one world system, that's where we're going. That's where we're headed. Everything else, folks, we don't know. God is working. Trust Him in your personal life. Trust Him in the everyday things. Keep your eyes turned to Him. And when the devil begins to throw these thoughts into your mind and making God seem that He's not here and insignificant, turn to this book. Remember David, the man after God's own heart. And he trusted in the Lord, and he trusted in his Savior. Church, thank you for meeting with us today. We will not have our Bible classes tonight, and so no Bible classes tonight. And I'll let you know about our Tuesday morning service. Church, I am praying for you. I am praying that God speaks to your hearts and keeps you encouraged as you continue to live for our Lord. Church, love you. You have a wonderful evening and a wonderful day in the Lord.
As the sun rose that morning on the day of Job's trial, he rose up to serve God as any other day. Bound and determined to live in God's favor, nothing could stand in his way. But then the messengers, they came one by one with their stories. In just a few moments, Job lost all he had. His great wealth and riches, the health of his body, even Job's children were dead. He said, the Lord giveth, He taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. I've served Him before and I'll serve Him today. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Then his wife came before him to voice her opinion. She said, you should end it, just curse God and die. But Job rose from the ashes and he looked toward the heavens and brushed back the tears from his eyes. He said, the Lord giveth, He taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. I've served Him before and I'll serve Him today. Blessed be the name of the Lord. When trouble comes suddenly, blessed be the name. When storm winds blow violently, blessed be the name. When Satan comes oppressing me, blessed be the name. I'll still serve God faithfully. Blessed be the name. The Lord giveth, He taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. I've served Him before and I'll serve Him today. Blessed be the name. Blessed be the name. Blessed be the name of the Lord. As the sun rose that morning on the day of Job's trial, he rose up to serve God as any other day. Bound and determined to live in God's favor, nothing could stand in his way. But then the messengers, they came one by one with their stories. In just a few moments, Job lost all he had. His great wealth and riches, the health of his body, even Job's children were dead. He said, "The Lord give